Well, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Dave Jones with Storm Center Communications, and today we're talking with a marine scientist, a author, and also a science advisor for celebrity cruises in the Galapagos. But we have one guest, and it's all three in one. Dr. Ellen Prager is joining us today. She's an author, and she is coming out now with a second book in a series. The first one called Escape Galapagos. Now this one called Escape Greenland. And Ellen, it's a real pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you so much. I'm very glad to be here.
Well, I'm going to jump right into it. Book one in the series, as I mentioned, was called Escape Galapagos. This one is called Escape Greenland, and it takes place in the Kangia ice fjord. How in the world did you come up with this location for this book?
So there's really two reasons. One, a couple of years ago, I went to Ilulissat, Greenland, to do research for a nonfiction book called Dangerous Earth that I was working on, and fell in love with the place. And I'll tell you a little bit more why in a second. Second reason, climate change, because it's one of the places in the world where scientists go to study the impacts of climate change in the Arctic and how ice sheets and glaciers are melting. But getting back to why Ilulissat in the Kangia ice fjord, let me just show you this picture behind me. How many places in the world can you sit on land and watch as an iceberg drifts by? It is one of the most astonishing places in the world. You can go hiking out to the Kangia ice fjord and see masses of icebergs all jammed in together. It was just fantastic. I couldn't get enough of it. The icebergs, the fjord, hiking. I got to go kayaking. I got to see blue ice. I got to see clear ice. I got to see speckled ice. It was just amazing. And so I wanted to share that experience and that setting with my readers.
Well, let me ask you this, because you have talked about climate change a little bit. What aspects of climate change sort of play a part in your book?
Well, good question. Climate change is obviously one of the major crises of our time right now. And one of the big questions with climate change is how is it impacting the Arctic as well as the Antarctic? But in Greenland, how is it causing the ice to melt and how fast is that happening? And one of the things we're trying to figure out is what's the process by which these big masses of ice melt? And so I tried to integrate some of those processes and questions into the story, like how the ice shelves can calve and create icebergs. Sometimes in doing that, they even create tsunamis in the fjord. Sometimes it's actually warm ocean water coming up from below the ice shelf, melting it underneath. We call that submarine melting. So some of these processes, it's science, lend themselves to the story, and I've integrated them into the story.
Wow. Well, as a meteorologist, I'm sort of excited to use the book when I go to talk to different people. But, you also integrate humor into the book. And I know that you have a great sense of humor. How does that come about? And why do you use humor so much in some of your writing?
So basically, I love to laugh. I think that laughter is just good for the soul, no matter how old you are. And also, middle grade, there's a certain sort of sarcastic sense of humor that seems to play very well. And I have to say that I kind of appreciate that kind of humor myself. And so I find it not only helps to engage the readers, but it makes learning fun. And I've always, that's really one of, I guess, my niches, or something I really always try and do with science, is I try and make it informative, accurate, but even entertaining. If you can make something fun and funny, boy, it's so much easier to learn.
That is true. That's absolutely true. Now, is this, if you sit back and think, is this really like your dream job? You've gotten a PhD in marine sciences, and you're, doing all this advising for celebrity cruises in the Galapagos, and you're writing kids' books. Is this like the dream job?
Well, it's a great job. It doesn't pay a lot of money. It's really a labor of love, this type of the book writing that I'm doing. But it is, I wouldn't say It's my dream job, but it's certainly getting close. It's been one of the most rewarding things I've done my entire career. I mean, I get most amazing notes from educators and parents. And one parent sent me a note saying that her son got caught reading one of my books under his desk in class and got in trouble, but it was okay because he was reading. I've had notes from struggling reader classes using my book. So it's been incredibly rewarding for that in that sense, because it's not just about the science learning. It's also about literacy. And I think we don't pay enough attention in this country, or maybe around the world as well, to the importance of kids learning to read, becoming engaged readers early on so that they are readers lifelong, and it leads to better achievement. Literacy is a huge issue.
Well, that's also quite important, because you have a section of the book towards the end which you talk about real versus made up. Tell us a little bit about that section and what you do in there.
So in Escape Galapagos and in Escape Greenland, I have a section in the back of the book called Real versus Made Up. And I have some bullets, and they're things that either have really happened in that location or in the story, or that I simply made up. And it asks the reader to figure out which is which, and it gives the answer later on. But it was such a popular section in the book with my readers, and when I was doing presentations with my audiences, that in the second book, Escape Greenland, I've expanded the real versus made up section. So it's really fun.
Well, everybody's always curious when someone comes out and writes one book and then they come out and write another book. And your books now are the Wonderlist Adventures. So is there a third book coming out? Will Ezzy and Luke be headed somewhere else anytime soon?
Oh, well, that's a very good question, Dave. And people have already been asking me that, and don't want to say too much. But yes, we are planning on a third book, and I've just started writing it. And for people who know me or want to dig into my background a little bit, I will just say it's taking place in some place I've spent a lot of time. And so if you know me or you know my history, you might be able to guess where Ezzy and Luke are going to go next.
Wow. Well, that's a great teaser. Ellen, thanks so much for joining us today, giving us a little insight on sort of what makes you tick as an author and writing these kids' books. And thanks so much for sharing your science, not only about marine science, but about climate change too. We all need to learn a lot more about that. So thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.